you everyone for tuning in to another episode of the AI Adoption Playbook. Today I'm here with Lawrence from Incident.io. I'll let Lawrence introduce himself in a second, but Lawrence and I actually go quite a long way back to our days, almost like more than 10 years ago now, I think.
Yeah, more than a decade.
Right.
It's been a while.
It has indeed. We both kind of cut our teeth at GoCardless, which is a great fintech startup in the UK. But Lawrence, I'll let you introduce yourself.
Yeah, sure. So I'm Lawrence. I currently work at Incident.io. I've been here as a product engineer for the last 3.5 years. I joined as the first employee back when it was just Pete, Stephen, and Chris. Incident.io is a incident response management system. That's like unpacking into an on-call app, a tool that helps you actually respond to your incidents, status pages, almost anything that you might need to actually respond to incidents. That's kind of what we sell in a broad product suite. We have customers like Netflix, Etsy, Skyscanner. Those are the sort of people who use us so that when stuff goes wrong with them, our tool can help them fix it faster. I've got a history before, like Ravin said. I spent a long time at GoCardless. In my time, I've been both a back-end, a product engineer, a front-end engineer at times, but also spent a while in SRE, so helping deal with really bad incidents at quite a large scale at GoCardless and building out a lot of their infrastructure. Nowadays, though, for about the past year, I've been in what we would call an AI engineer role at Incident and building out a lot of our more exciting AI products, specifically working on an automated incident investigator. So something that can go and figure out what actually happened in your incident and tell you how to fix it, checking things like logs, traces, metrics, and telling you, hey, you need to go revert that change or restart that pod.
Yeah, I mean, that's obviously incredibly interesting use case, and we're going to dive into it in a great deal of detail. Before we do, I'd love to just get a sense from you and for the audience, what are you actually using AI for today? Like you personally, Lawrence, then more broadly at Incident, where are the areas where you guys have found it, to be value additive for you?
Honestly, the answer is in loads of places. We're really heavy users of AI at Incident now. I think for me, my journey with how I gradually adopted AI was there was definitely a tipping point where suddenly the models and the tech became good enough that they could really accelerate me in terms of building software. Yeah, I think it was around about like 4.0 or Sonnet 3.5. I think it was Sonnet 3.5 V2 actually, where suddenly using Claude, I realized that it was possible for it to just give me in one shot often a lot of the stuff that I was asking it to do. And I think I probably wouldn't have got into it too much if it wasn't for the Claude projects. So in Claude, you can create projects and you can upload project knowledge. So I spent a bit of time, a few hours one day, collecting together all of our engineering documentation and gradually transforming it into markdown docs that we could go put inside of Claude's project. And we have one engineering project that's shared across all of the engineers at Incident.io that suddenly could produce in one shot code that was following our patterns, following our style guide. It knew things like what to avoid and what to do in database migrations. And yeah, since then, I think the adoption level has been kind of crazy. We have a lot of people now using Claude Code to just write a lot of code for them. And we're hitting up against issues with that, honestly. You need to be very careful with any machine that's producing a lot of code on your behalf,
right.
And making sure that people understand the code that they write, even if they did not themselves write it, is their responsibility is another thing. But also at the same time, it's kind of incredible what you can do nowadays.
Yeah, the rate of progress is absolutely phenomenal, as you say. And yeah, it's also super interesting how I feel like the early adopters of virtually every technology is engineers and developers, but I think it's also really interesting to see how it's spread to very, very many different parts of the org as well. Curious,
outside
of the engineering team, have you guys seen, what use cases have you seen for
Yeah, we're seeing them all over the place. So we use AI in a lot of our GTM motion. So we're using Clay to automate a bunch of pipeline processes. Tom, our VP of marketing, he is a massive AI stan. You'll find him on LinkedIn sharing all the stuff that he's using AI for. I know we have a competitor pulse channel where we're listening to all of our gong calls, and when they
Right.
mention a competitor, we'll take notes from that call and we'll go drop them in the channel, so that if you're subscribed to this channel, you get a continual stream of like, oh, this person's struggling with X because of these reasons, or they're looking to change to us because we offer something that these people don't. And this is stuff that just before would have just been so far, it would have been so laborious that no one would have done it. Whereas actually the value of having that constant feed of information pre-processed and summarized for you is really, really good.
Yeah, 100%. One of the things that is like just really remarkable to me, I think, about this stuff is a lot of people think about Gen AI stuff still in terms of, okay, this saves me like 30 minutes or 40 minutes, like doing this task or that task. But when you find specific things where like the information will just be like, as you said, like way too laborious to even do in the first place, it's actually like much more transformative and much more like powerful than that.
I mean, it's also like we use Credal, and we've got it configured so that this is in our product questions channel and a load of other different Slack channels as well. And I was the person that made the case for Credal back in the day, and I remember writing up the doc, and well, yeah, I was like going through it and trying to make how much time is this going to save us. And for those who don't know, with Credal, it sucks in a bunch of the knowledge about how your product works. You can connect it to your docs, all this internal knowledge base, and then when people go and ask something in a Slack channel, which we already had as a Slack channel, right? We had product questions, and people would often turn up there and go, hey, like, I don't know, do you support escalating to a second layer? How does this work? Can we import our schedules from Opsgenie? Something like that. I think the thing that was really compelling to me was we were really hitting up against a problem as we increasingly hired people into New York and San Francisco, where the knowledge that would be needed to answer the question was in the UK. And it was becoming a problem where maybe someone in SF would ask a question at what was 8, 9 p.m. UK time, which meant that like they would get an answer when the engineering team woke up. And that honestly meant that they'd only get an answer after they'd like signed off. So it actually meant that there was a day of delay. And I think that the amazing thing with AI is taking something like a process like that, and it's not just that you want the AI to produce a good answer, which it can, but you want AI to produce the answer immediately. And the type of value that you get from someone asking that question and immediately getting the answer back, irrespective of whether or not there's a human on the other side, is huge. This means that people in sales calls can literally drop something in Slack and get an answer back immediately, whether or not they're in SF and the engineering team are in bed. So yeah, when I did the value prop for it, yeah, I mean, I think we're paying you a fair price, Robin.
Awesome. Well, glad to hear that. Okay, well, one of the things that's actually pretty interesting about the stuff that you talked about is like you guys are obviously thinking about AI both from an internal productivity perspective, but also from like the stuff that you're building in your product that you were talking about earlier, the sort of AI incident manager. How do you think, Incident went about figuring out where to place its AI bets, right? Like structurally, how do you guys operate? Do you have someone who's like in charge of AI? Is it very decentralized? Like, how does it actually practically work?
We are still a relatively small company, so we've announced our Series B yesterday. So hopefully we'll be a much larger company soon. Thank you. Yeah, and for anyone listening, we are hiring product and AI engineers. Hopefully you'll get a sense of what that means in a moment.
Where are you?
We're hiring them into London. Thank you for the prompt. Yeah, we're based in London, so useful to clarify. But so we are quite a small team at the moment. We're about 25, 30 people in PD with maybe 20 engineers. And that's split into 3 teams. And we have one team that's on AI, one team that's on response, and one team that's on call at the moment. Again, that will get much bigger this year, hopefully. But for the minute anyway, AI was a strategic bet that we kicked off in the company to go, we think that AI should be able to really revolutionize or totally change the way that you run incident response.
Yep.
How do we end up leveraging it in a way that we can get the value to our customers as fast as possible? And honestly, like it took us a while to figure this out. We were thinking about all sorts of stuff from like, do we build an incident knowledge base? Do we automatically try and generate runbooks and things like that? Until by the time we kind of got to the point where we were getting a lot more proficient with the AI tools, because we tried a bunch of these things and getting a sense of how they worked. It was at that point that we realized, honestly, the most effective thing that we could do and the most ambitious one would be to just try and tell people like how to solve their incident. And at the end of the day, if you can turn up and like Netflix are having some horrible streaming outage and Beyonce's singing but no one can hear it, if you if you can turn up and go, it's actually, you know, that Kubernetes cluster over there, you need to fix it by diverting this thing to that queue. That is the $1 billion like solution that we're going for. But yeah, that's what we're aiming for now. Along the way, we have introduced things like an incident chatbot that can help assist you during incidents and automate a ton of different actions that you might do. So writing updates, drafting comms, things like that. We've increased the kind of capability of our existing AI features because we've had these for years. So automatically generating incident updates, things like that, they've got better. But yeah, like there's a ton of features, there's a ton of opportunity here. We have been focusing mostly on the most ambitious one because we think that's where honestly the value is.
It's like extremely cool. I think like one of the things that, you know, is what's tricky about this stuff is that when you go for like the extremely ambitious thing, like straight out of the gate, like it's a high bar, right? Like you're setting yourself up to work really, really hard, and it you know, it can be difficult a lot for such a new technology where the technology is moving under your feet like very quickly, right? The capabilities of the models are changing, the sort of correct architecture for how to build these systems is changing. I mean, I think it was a couple of days ago, Google launched their like agent to agent like specification. The MCP specification is also like pretty new. You know, how do you think about tackling these big like multi-month? I'm assuming you can't build like an AI incident manager in like 4 weeks, right? So how do
You
you
cannot, apparently. We would if we could. No.
yeah, how do you go about tackling these big like multi-month projects when the industry itself is like moving so fast?
I have a principle that I've learned from like my years doing this stuff, which is you want to be very careful when you're doing hard things to try and only ever be learning one new thing at any one time.
Yeah.
So you want to, whenever you're trying to upskill an organization into something like a new technology, AI is one of them, you want to try and contain the amount of ambiguity and challenge that the team has. So the way that I thought about this was, even though we knew that there was this big ambitious goal, which is like solve the incident for you, that is very much like going after that without any prep work or any ramp up would be trying to eat the whole elephant or whatever the phrase is. So the way that I looked at it was, as we were getting into experimenting with AI, the thing that I was focused on was finding ways that we could implement features that we could use ourselves and dog food, things that could bring us really close to how the AI functionality was working without having to require us to build the whole thing all in one go. So that was actually why we ended up creating the chatbot. I think at the time we were focused on automatically trying to generate runbooks from historical incident data. But if we wanted to get time and like shots on goal where people are able to quickly modify something in AI and get like some input from it and figure out how the prompts are working, it felt really sensible to me to try and hook this up into our bot so that we could just have people chat to it and then they could get a feel for how the AI was working, and they could come away with a stronger intuition, and they have a nice test bed where they can build new AI features and see if they work. So I think the key piece of advice that I would give to people is make sure that you find opportunities for your team to play with this technology. Don't try and do the most ambitious thing first and look for it as if you're kind of like training to do a race. Like if the big ambitious thing is the race, you don't want to run the whole thing at once. Figure out how you can warm up and do smaller things that keep things fun. That is another thing as well. AI, especially the more ambitious stuff, can be really crushingly demoralizing. You'll have weeks where it will go really well. In fact, you'll have a day where you'll maybe make a ton of progress, and then you might have an entire week where nothing really works. So if you can, especially if you have a team who are motivated by shipping things and shipping product, you want to give them opportunities to build something that gives them that buzz because it keeps them going through the harder, tougher times.
That makes a ton of sense. Speaking of some of the harder things, especially around building like an AI incident manager, I imagine that if you are Netflix and you have like, you know, your big boxing match that's like going through an incident, it's actually really, really critical that the AI incident manager is not like a distraction, right? Because it's really easy to imagine a world where some AI bot is like, oh, you know, it comes up with like a bunch of random stuff. They aren't like super helpful or accurate, and it actually ends up distracting the team and making the incident even worse, right? How do you think about governance, control, and like reliability for how do you get such a complex, sophisticated system to actually perform at the level that you would need it to for a company like Netflix to deploy your like AI bot in production.
The happy thing about this, I guess, is that achieving that goal is like it builds on tools that you're going to need to even start on the journey in the first place. So I think I was working on the investigation system, doing like the word or the phrase vibe coding has been claimed differently now, but at the time it was making what I could cynically call vibe-based changes to the system, where I went intuitively, I think if I go modify this part, I think it's going to get better. But at the time, it was very much like, I guess I'll find out in the next 10 incidents on our account if this has done anything good or if it's just entirely off the rails. And it was around about, I think, New Year. I think it was New Year's Day. I was just like, this isn't going to work. Like, we need to pause for a second. And at this point, I'd spent enough time that I had the pieces in my head of what we actually needed in terms of internal tooling to try and build this thing properly. And I stopped and spent maybe about a month putting together this idea of like data sets of incidents and labeling incidents with certain like authoritative verified answers. Then we built a back test facility where we could go and run these investigations against a bunch of incidents, and then we could grade the investigations and they come up with a scorecard that could tell us which part of the investigation was correct, how correct was it, did it get anything wrong, where did it go wrong. All of this tooling is now actually how we develop this investigation system. So if you've ever worked with people in like ML disciplines, I've got a friend who is off in SF now, but he spent a long time as like a principal AI researcher in DeepMind. And I was talking with him and he's like, oh yeah, man, like what you do is you get these systems and they do a load of crazy stuff. But the first thing that you do is establish an evaluation metric.
Right.
And then you go, what is the baseline? Like figure out a way to come up with an answer on how well is the system performing now. So that's really build yourself a data set and figure out how to run it. And then you hill climb and you get your engineers on the team to sit there and go, well, I want to improve that metric and I'm going to focus on precision here. And I'm going to do whatever I can in order to increase precision. And actually at this point, like maybe you increase cost or maybe you decrease recall. It doesn't really matter. Like figure out what you can do to the system to try and move this stuff around. And then make sure that your tooling can help tell you really quickly if you've gone in the right or wrong direction. And this is the only way that I've found works working with these agentic systems.
Yep.
They're just too messy and chaotic for you to be making changes on the basis that you think this might work. You need to be able to measure it. And ever since doing that, we've found that progress on this has become suddenly tractable. And I think it went from kind of like just me being able to work on this thing to me being able to onboard other people in the team onto it, which honestly was like one of the biggest, most stressful parts of working on this thing. Because like if you have a system where errors compound and you're trying to like hold the whole thing in your head, you just can't have another person over here kind of like YOLOing changes in one place, because you could literally end up looking at the output and thinking that it was your changes that did it and it wasn't. So yeah, I think establishing this concept of like scorecards, and we have a nice productized experience now, and we actually have a place in our internal tooling called the leaderboard, where for different parts of the investigation system we've saved like the best scorecard and whoever achieved it. And now the job of an engineer is like, oh, you got to go beat that leaderboard. It's like go play Pac-Man and try and beat the high score. But in this case, it's like I've gone and modified how we vectorize this stuff, and as a result, or I've been cleverer with how I've searched for code changes, and it's got better.
I mean, that makes a ton of sense. I think one of the things I hear a lot from AI engineers building with this stuff is that although, I think what you're saying is very true and I hear it very consistently, that like you need metrics and you need evals, similar to, as you said, like the traditional ML world. One of the things that's different about this versus the traditional ML world is that typical predictive analytics, you have some kind of, numerical or categorical variable that you're trying to predict, right? And so you can create a loss function that just like very accurately says like, was this better or worse, right? Whereas when you're trying to predict like the next best token, it's like kind of a bit more subjective, right? There isn't necessarily so much ground truth. Even if you create that ground truth of answer, like this was a great answer. Let's say the great answer is like, yes, that's correct. And then the next answer is yes, correct with a full stop, right? It's like not technically your like ground truth answer, but it is of course still right, right? Like how do you think about doing that sort of complicated eval when you don't have like it's not as simple as like the right answer is one and there's like no possible other right answer other than like this particular thing.
I can give you a view on this. So, I mean, we're in that place, right?
Right.
What the hell is the right answer for like an investigator, like telling you what's gone wrong? It's very difficult to do. But in our system, what we've done is we have incidents, and the job of this investigation agent is to, at the very start of the incident, say we think it's gone wrong in this way, right?
Yeah.
Now, the benefit of us in this situation compared to some other like agentic scenarios is that we then run the incident, right? So the incident will then play out inside of the Slack channel, and you're sending updates and you're recording what happened. And our system really is like a master record for what actually happened. It is an incident log. So what we end up doing is at the end of an incident, when we close the incident, that's when we go, all right, we now know everything about this incident that we think we're going to know. And we can use all of the data that was collected post the point at which we ran the investigation to try and like post facto decide whether or not the investigation was good or not. So what we actually do is we end up processing a bunch of information through LLMs when the incident is closed, and we store these things as what we call like incident ground truths, which are, we think this incident was caused by this code change, for example. Now, up until the point where this is all inside of our production account, it's not running on our customers, it's just our instance. Up until the point where a human turns up and they go, I will verify that ground truth. It's not verified, but we've used the AI to kind of project what the right answer is anyway. And then the scorecards that we create are built by graders, which themselves use LLMs as a judge. So we've already pre-processed what we think are the right answers for this investigation. And then we maybe even have a hypothetical investigation that we think would have been really useful, produced by an LLM that knew everything that happened in the incident because it was run at the end of the incident. And then we can use an LLM as a judge to determine whether or not we think that this was good or not. Like one thing that we do is we go back through the incident and we try and determine if we said in the investigation that, it was this code change, or you should look at this message. So did we surface information that later proved to be useful for the responders? How much faster did we surface it than the human responder found it themselves? And then that's how you can kind of determine the value that we're offering with this system.
Yeah, that's super, super cool. So it sounds like what you guys are doing is you're essentially, you're running a kind of parallel process with the AI incident manager is like making suggestions, at least for your internal teams. And then you're actually looking at kind of what the actual output was and using an LLM to evaluate, like, was the AI's suggestions actually consistent with what the human?
Yes, exactly that. And like there's like that trick, by the way, is a bit of a trick that works in more places than you might think. This idea of being able to evaluate AI interactions and make the most of the fact that your AI interaction happened and then you collect more data after. So one example is our chatbot. Whenever anyone chats with our instant chatbot, we schedule a job where 10 or 15 minutes later, I can't remember now, we'll come around and we'll try and grade whether or not the interaction was good or bad. And what we do is when we grade it, we include the conversation that then followed after, because it turns out if your chatbot does something stupid, often if it's in a Slack channel, someone's like, oh, for Christ's sake, like, why did you do that? And if you then run the grader only after the chatbot has came in, you can very successfully or very accurately go, this was a really poor interaction because someone is like swearing at us. So yeah, there's lots of places you can do this. And it surprised me how many times the systems that you're running these AI interactions with actually can give you themselves a bit more data and help you figure out if you did a good or a bad job. And then we score those. So we turn those into numerical values and we say, how aligned were we? Did we achieve what we wanted to? We give it a star or a poo emoji based on what's going on. And we pipe all these things to a Slack channel so that whenever we see a bad interaction, our team can go in and investigate. But we can then also aggregate the scorecards that we produced over time So we can see for like a customer's account what the aggregate scorecard is. So we go like, for the last week, how has our chatbot been doing? Under what like operations? Was it doing good? Was it doing bad? And then it tells us if we got better or worse. And you can detect when you deploy things if you've made a change across some, like maybe incident updates have got worse and suddenly they're really bad. That would then come out in the scorecard.
Really, really, really interesting stuff. I like the idea of like using the rest of the conversation history to like evaluate whether the like original interaction was good or not. I think that's really interesting. Although I definitely have some examples in mind where the chatbot's actually been so good that someone's been like, holy, you know, four-letter word.
Yeah.
It seems like it didn't work out for that, I guess. But okay, really, one of the things that, you know, obviously, because the technology is so new, like it's not actually the case that you can put a job ad up and say, I want someone with like, you know, 10 years experience working with generative AI, right? Or at least you could, but like, you know, if you want someone with 10 years experience, you have to hire them from DeepMind or OpenAI, and they're already making
Yep.
like $17 million a year, right? So how do you think about hiring into these sorts of roles? Like, what are the profiles of people that you look for to build a team that...
Yeah, well, you offer them 80 million a year, don't you? But
Right.
no. So firstly, I should say like we have just launched an AI engineer role, and like we've got a blog post about why like that role makes sense for us. And the reason that it makes sense is that your job as an AI engineer is materially different from a product engineer. Not totally different. There's a lot that's shared. But the analogy that I would use is it's just as different from product engineering as SRE might be from normal backend engineering. While you do touch on all the different, you're still doing software development, you're still doing all of this, you get other elements to the role that end up taking up proportionally a lot more of your time. So in AI engineering, you're thinking about these evaluation metrics, you're like trying to hill climb like for weeks on end, and maybe you don't like slow feedback loops, and they exist quite a lot in AI as they do in SRE. And if you're the type of person that doesn't like that, then you don't want to apply. So it's worth calling it something different just to make it clear that the role is asking for something different. But like I thought when I was trying to hire SREs maybe 5-6 years ago, my opinion on who would make the best AI engineer is a really strong product engineer who is excited and enthusiastic about working with AI. The truth is that like the strong engineering like mindset that you get from being a great product engineer translates really well to AI engineering. And you just need the excitement to get over the difficulties of working with this technology and to motivate you to go and research it and like learn fast, because that can be hard. So yeah, I would say different role is useful, but the ideal candidate that we're looking for is basically just our product engineer with a strong interest in AI, rather than someone with like a huge ML background. I think the ML stuff is honestly teachable, or at least we found it to be.
Yeah, that is pretty interesting. I'm curious about how you think about the tension there between, you know, I think the traditional stereotype of the great product engineer is that there's someone that likes getting out, speaking to customers, like understanding the customer's problem really deeply. And then suddenly I think the stereotype of the great AI engineer is that they're just very data driven and they're very metrics driven and they're super into looking at their dashboard and making like the hill climbing problem happen. How do you think about that tension there?
I think it very much depends on the type of systems that you're building, right? Like this investigation system is like, we'll do a really good job of building this investigation agent if we come up with a really good idea of what the most expert incident responder in each of our customers' organizations will do when they first like try and debug an incident. It is not the case that because you're suddenly in like metric land, that you need to have less empathy for the customer or be speaking with them less, really. And honestly, like a lot of the AI challenge here is how are we going to package it up? Like you said earlier, this like AI investigation message, they can't just like dump everything in the kitchen sink
Right.
onto the person. That would be rubbish, right? So you have to think about how are you exposing the results of your investigation to people. And this is really honestly fundamentally a UX challenge. You need to be talking with people, understanding how they want to consume the information, and figuring out what information is most important to them so that you can prioritize it right. You then need to be building a UX that helps them understand like what was the thought process that this agent went through in order to come to the conclusions that it got to. You probably need some way of interacting with the thought process. So like deep research, like the Google team are trying to build like interactivity into the process. So they'll try and tell you which things that they're looking at. And as it's going, you can go, oh, actually, can you add this to the list and stuff like that? This is something that we'll be building into our investigation system. And that's honestly a new way of interacting with AI as it's going through a long like thinking process. So yeah, it's, the two things are different, but I don't think that they are wholly divided. And there's a lot that's shared between the product and AI engineer role.
Really, really cool. Yeah, super, super interesting. It's sort of interesting to me how you framed it as like you sort of think of the team as being largely comprised of like this one persona. I think that's actually kind of unusual, actually. I think mostly what I hear is folks describe their ideal like team composition as being comprised of like multiple different personas. I'm curious, like, how do you think about that? Like, is there a reason that you think just like putting lots of people with the same mindset and the same kind of like energy that they bring to their job, like, does that create some kind of compounding like magical effect that is hard if you have like lots of different perspectives?
Firstly, like this is the early days for us, right? So we're still very much in the early days of trying to figure out how to do AI engineering correctly.
Right.
That said, I think what will happen is we will end up like our product can benefit from having AI everywhere.
Yeah.
The AI team that we have at the moment is about pushing our like frontier of how we develop AI products at Incident. It's about figuring out what works and how we can be productive with this technology and build really high quality product. Yeah. It happens to be that they will then work on the most complex of the AI features, which for us at the moment is going to be this Incident Investigator. But there is tons of other AI applications that will happen inside of the other product teams, and we won't be calling them AI engineers. They'll be working with the tools that we produce, but the difference is they probably wouldn't have an ownership of those tools themselves, whereas inside of our AI team, we'll be expecting people to evolve the tooling so that we can build our expertise in AI and like think more deeply about how we get better at this stuff. So I think we will hire, like we will have a mix of people who will be more product focused in the AI team, but we will also have a bunch of product engineers in other teams who will be doing a mix of AI work who wouldn't necessarily be AI engineers exactly. So it's more fungible than it might at first seem. And for what's worth, we're not telling people to put AI engineer on their LinkedIn profile. Like internally, everyone here is an engineer. This is just about really branding and trying to communicate the experience you'll have at the company in the most effective way.
Totally cool. That makes a ton of sense. You spoke a little bit about the tooling component of the job there as well, which I am pretty interested in. It sounds like you've thought very hard and deeply about evals and metrics, which is really cool. I know that there's like a huge ecosystem of like players that like sell AI evals and metrics. How did you guys go about that? Did you use something open source and build on that yourself? Did you buy like a tool from a vendor? Like what actually worked in the end?
We've actually created a microsite where we've put together a ton of posts about how we're working with AI. So you can get it. It's like building with AI on incident.io. That has posts in it, one of which is what internal tooling did we build and why did we build it? And it walks you through the kind of the decision process that we went through. And there are a couple of things that went into our decision, which was to build all of this ourselves. The first was we were coming to AI engineering without any expertise. And my worry was slightly that we would end up buying a tool that had all these knobs and dials and all these metrics and everything. And honestly, I'd look at it and I'd just go, oh, cool. Now we're rating tonality, but is that relevant to us? Like, am I just going to give the team this tool that would encourage them to do things that doesn't actually make sense and doesn't push us forward? And it becomes just a distraction. So I was a bit concerned about that. So I wanted to walk before we ran. But then the other aspect of this was, well, there are two more. One is the security concern. So we didn't want to go through another vendor process. Like even like with OpenAI and Anthropic, we have a zero data retention agreement. We have very sensitive data in our system. No one wants incident data to be passed around to a load of third parties. So adding another third party was something that we didn't really think that we could do. So we've kept everything internal to our system. The other thing was if you end up building the tooling that helps you understand your AI interactions next door to where they occur inside of your product, alongside all of the data in your product, the type of tooling that you can produce is just genuinely much more sophisticated and much more powerful.
What do you mean by that?
We have inside of our dashboards where all of our incident data is, we're able to like label our incidents and build up the ground truths right next door to where we have our incident updates. When we end up running a back test and run all this investigation stuff against our system, we can see everything that was run as part of all the different prompts, like many hundreds of prompts that make up the entire investigation system. And we can literally just view it in the dashboard alongside all the surrounding incident context. When we want to pull down an eval and put it in our eval test suite, we have a button that can automatically adjust what we saw the prompt do based on what we see the investigation ground truth is. So if we've got a prompt that's like shortlisting a code change, we can be like, actually, this was wrong. I want to take it to my eval suite, but can you auto-correct it so that it matches what we were expecting from the ground truth? And it will rejig the response, and then what you pull down is automatically fixed. This is stuff that like is quite wild. And the other exciting thing for me is it's the step beyond where we're at the moment. And so we're yet to build a lot of this stuff. But for me, us being able to automatically triage why investigations did work or didn't. So using AI to look at this vastly complicated process and end up automatically tagging all the investigations with, well, this went wrong because we don't have this data, or this went wrong because this prompt looks a bit dodgy, classifying them all together and then automatically surfacing the investigation system is, defective in this area for this customer. That's something that I'm really interested in doing, especially because it should allow us to be privacy preserving. So instead of us looking directly into customers' data, we just surface like what are the issues, and the AI is allowing us to process how we can improve this investigation system without a human having to go in and figure it out themselves.
Sweet. Okay, so we're in the final stretch, Lawrence, and I've got like some silly questions for you at the end. So
I'm happy for those.
okay, so actually, this is actually kind of interesting because of what you guys were talking about earlier with the incident manager. The sort of silly version of this question is like, when will generative AI replace your job? It's actually kind of interesting in the context of you like literally building an AI incident manager, right?
Yeah. I mean, I think the interesting thing here from someone who's trying to sell an AI product, right? People don't want AI that's going to replace them. I like maybe at one point AI will be good enough to entirely replace someone, but it's actually kind of it's very funny when you're talking with investors about this stuff, right? So it's like they'll ask questions about, oh yeah, no, but won't AI just like immediately remove the need for you in 5 years? And you look at them and go, well, me. if I'm gone here, like what's happened to you? Like we're all screwed. I think this is a moot point, right? But no, so I think the focus for me has always been on helping humans do their job more effectively, using AI to do the things that are like essentially the heavy lifting and surfacing insights so that humans can be much more effective. That's at the root of the thing that we're building at the moment. And at the moment, the only thing that I see from a lot of the AI tooling out there that seems like really compelling to me will be making software engineers more effective. Now, whether or not making software engineers so much more effective means that we have an oversupply of software engineering jobs, I don't know. But I think there's some paradox in economics, right? Which is, I think it is Devon's part, I forget now, but where if you have something like software engineering, it's priced in at a particular price at the moment, and the demand is set by just how many people can afford it, not necessarily whether or not there is more demand for it. Now, arguably, maybe the world needs a lot more software. I don't know if that's true, but they need a lot more software, but they just until now couldn't afford it. And now if AI comes in and reduces the price, perhaps the supply will increase like commensurately. I'm not sure. It'll be interesting to see. I don't want to live in a world where my job is not needed, but we will find out if it's coming down the pipe. I think not at least for like several years will I be worried at all.
That makes tons of sense. I actually think there's a really interesting analogy for Devon's paradox with AI itself, right? So if you look at AI like a few years ago, the price of compute has gone down so much, and like that has basically meant that we've discovered hundreds, if not like tens of thousands actually, of use cases for AI that were economically like not feasible before, but are like suddenly economically feasible. And so
absolutely,
like the value that AI creates in the world is obviously even though the price of it has gone down, like the GDP of AI, if that makes sense, has gone up like orders of magnitude.
Yeah, for sure.
And I think there's probably something similar for all sorts of other types of work here, where even if the price goes down in some ways, like the value that you can create ultimately goes up because you're operating at high leverage. Okay, that's super cool. And then next question is, do you have a definition for AGI, and when do you think it arrives?
Part of this job has been me subscribing to the fire hose of all the subreddits on AI and all that. I think it's hard to know. There's a load of research coming out of Anthropic about trying to interpret like how these models are thinking. I think they were trying to like do essentially like a model brain scan, and I'm not yet sure whether or not the research that they're doing is like kind of creating meaning from nothing, kind of like seeing what they want to see in it, or whether or not it is really legit. And I mean, it's at least very interesting trying to introspect how these models are working. It does look like there's a lot of emergent behavior coming from them. And honestly, having done a course in computational neurodynamics back when I was at uni, maybe 10 years ago, and having simulated like neural networks and like biological ones, I don't actually think that there's much difference between the way that like LLMs work and actually how people think, really. Though I know that people like have strong beliefs otherwise. I wouldn't have an actual timeline for this. I think like honestly I'd end up averaging out all of the outspoken people on the internet and just hoping for the best. But yeah, I'll be very interested to see whether or not we get AGI in the sense of something that could replace a human with a very generalized intelligence, or whether or not the thing that we see first is much more like is it ASI, like artificial superintelligence in specific areas. Like arguably we are going to try and build a super intelligent incident investigator, right? It should be better than a human at solving incidents, but I wouldn't want to spend my days chatting with it, and maybe that means it's not AGI.
Yeah, that's super interesting. I do find it pretty curious how, like, if you look at these benchmarks, you could get AI to apparently be like one of the top 1,000 software engineers in the world, according to like some competitive programming benchmark. But the practical reality of like using the tools, like, yes, Cursor is amazing, but like, and yes, like Lovable and Bolt or whatever are really cool. But do I actually believe that I would rather have like 100 lovables than like, my actual team of 10 software engineers? Like, it's not even close, right? At least today.
Yeah, I think it's also the thing here is that you like the person that hasn't gone through the process of building it, having gone through actually the mechanism of putting something together, doesn't understand it as well as the person who did. And the intuition on what you should build and where you should evolve your product next comes, I think, from spending all that time thinking so carefully through the details that you've managed to produce the thing in the first place. So yeah, if I had to, one team that has gone and built a product themselves and one team that had an AI produce it for them, who am I going to bet on making the more appropriate next decision to evolve their product? Well, it's going to be the one that built it themselves, irrespective of how good the AI tools may be to evolve things. So yeah, I don't know. I guess it will be, if you see code as grunt work that should be removed from people's jobs in order to give them more time to think about the product, then I guess this is fine. But like, I do wonder how much removing the process of actually building things removes people's intuition about how to evolve the product in the right way.
Yeah, 100%. I think that that's like a really, really interesting dynamic where I think building in the past, like great product has so often been produced by software engineers, where like it's actually the case that putting the engineer themselves like in charge of making the product decisions has got a fantastic track record of actually creating like really high quality product decisions. And that's kind of counterintuitive if you just believe that like there's the grunt work of writing the code, and then there's like real work of like designing the product.
And I think the product designers who have thought more like engineers are the people who are being able to leverage AI much more effectively, or at least that's what I've been seeing. Like the people who I knew were very strong system thinkers who maybe had dabbled with programming before are the ones who are adopting this stuff a lot quicker.
100%, totally makes sense. Okay, we are at time, Lawrence. It was awesome having you on. Thank you so much for being here. If someone is listening and they're curious about the AI engineering role at Incident, what should they do?
they should visit the incident.io website. We, I think, are highlighting our $62 million Series B at the moment. If you go there, we have a bunch of information around what the company wants to do strategically, our ambition for the next few years, and it will direct you into our AI microsite where you can see what the team are working on. You can see our rationale for why we have an AI engineer role and a bunch of other very useful practical tips if you're working with AI. So please do check it out and let us know if you have any feedback.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Lawrence, and look forward to speaking to you again soon.
Yeah. Thanks for having me on.